after passing a debt ceiling deal that codifies the end of the student loan repayment pause, Senate Republicans, along with corporate Democrats, decided to try to stick it to students one last time. A measure which passed the House along party lines last week and just passed by the Senate repeals Biden's modest student loan forgiveness plan, which forgives $10,000 to $20,000 if you have Pell Grants in student loan debt. So it's a little bit of relief. Would also, again, immediately end the pause on repayment. But if that's not bad enough, the measure also retroactively adds in the interest that has been paused on the payments, basically taking your balance and shooting it back up for just no apparent reason. Because, of course, as I mentioned, this passed 52 to 46, 2 Democrats and 1 independent senator voting with Republicans. You're not going to be surprised who they are. One of them is Senator Joe Manchin. The other one, Senator John Tester, and the independent is former Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema. Shocker. Manchin, in his statement, said he voted to overturn the president's plan because the country cannot afford to add another $400 billion to its national debt. Well, then maybe you should, stop voting for military increases every single frickin' year. Wouldn't that be nice? You seem to always have more and more money for defense contractors and, oil companies and coal companies, fossil fuel subsidies. Oh, that's right, because you're a coal baron. Oh, yeah, you take that money, you take that public money, taxpayer money, you stuff it in your pocket, and that's okay. But when it comes to student loan debt relief for students that have been signed into predatory loans at high interest rates for education that in some cases was incredibly predatory, or at least didn't lead to the types of jobs and the type of pay to be able to afford to pay off those loans. Apparently, they're screwed, screw them, but help the oil companies and the coal companies, because they're the ones who really need the money. No, F off. Manchin also says that the policy forces hardworking taxpayers who have already paid off their loans or did not go to college to shoulder the cost. So on that logic, we can't do anything that makes people's lives better in the future. Because it didn't have an effect on somebody in the past. So you can't lower the price of prescription drugs, for example, now, because it's super sky high. By the way, it's an incredibly popular policy allowing Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices because they are too high. Oh, but we can't do that because somebody else had to pay more. So we can't lower the price of insulin, for example, because somebody else had to pay higher for insulin. It's just not fair to them. It's not fair. I mean, the same thing can apply to healthcare. You can't lower the cost of healthcare because, somebody before had to pay more for their healthcare, for their health insurance. So I guess we can't ever make anyone's life better at all because someone's life before just sucked. Now, I love how they apply that argument to student loan debt relief, but never when it comes to things like corporate profits or subsidies. Once again, subsidies that go to businesses that don't actually need it. Right now, the American people are dealing with greedflation. There are things that, things cost a lot more now than they used to, not just because it takes more money to, manufacture and ship, supply chain issues and things like that. Not just because of that, because, that's a real thing. It happened in the pandemic. It's not just that, though. They took that, and yes, they increased their price on that, and then they decided, why waste this opportunity to, pick your pocket? And we're just going to add even more costs on top of that so that, we can take the extra money and, again, stick it in our pockets. That's it. wait, why do we have to pay more? Again, not only are we eating the extra cost, but we're also eating an extra cost for you to be able to put additional profits into your pocket. This is after a lot of these same corporations took billions of dollars in PPP loans, which they do not have to pay back if they had met certain conditions. Okay. That, they took that money when they didn't need it and used it to buy back their own stock and give executive bonuses. Many places even laid off much of their staff. And yet you had a lot of these same companies, massively profitable, even throughout the pandemic, didn't exactly need it, but still somehow qualified, buying back their own stock. And even if they had to repay it, the money that they made back in inflating their stock prices, well, they ended up getting a massive profit. What about also interest rates? You can talk about interest rates. When you have interest rates for student loans being very, very high compared to corporations that are able, and banks, to be able to go and borrow from the Federal Reserve this money at very, very incredibly comically low interest rates, at least for quite a long time. Does that sound fair? Wait, I thought, and let's also go to corporations or some companies that do bankruptcy, firing their entire staff, but then, leaving with a golden parachute. Now, a lot of these companies, they go bankrupt, they have loans. They don't have to pay their loans. No. They liquidate their company and then, again, retire with the golden parachute, get a gigantic, massive payout while everyone else gets screwed. They don't have to pay back their loans, but we have to pay back ours on predatory student loans. Again, in order to get jobs that, in a lot of cases, now no longer pay enough to justify the costs, we get no relief. These people are ghouls. And yet, they have the gall to call us the entitled ones. No, there are two separate rules here for student borrowers versus corporate borrowers. People like Donald Trump, who can go bankrupt so many times and become president of the United States and never have to pay back his loans. The whole thing about student loans, though, it is a scam. And there shouldn't be student loans in the first place. Now, the whole thing started because Nixon wanted to price people out of education. He thought there were too many communists, literally, coming out of the colleges.
Pink-haired communists.
So, he did what he could, defunded state schools. Reagan, along with Reagan, defunded schools in California, for example, higher education. The result of that is that tuition began to steadily rise, and to a point where now people had to take out private bank loans to be able to afford college. And it wasn't until the federal government stepped in, eventually, to be able to guarantee loans to people who otherwise would not be able to afford them and did not want to join the military. And take part in, bombing other people, just in order to get an education. I can see how that's not appealing. The result of all that, the federal government getting involved, is now these colleges said, we can now get guaranteed loans. So we're just going to raise, our tuition higher and higher and higher. And at the end of the day, it is the students that get mostly screwed. Those students also end up being taxpayers. They want to talk about the taxpayer all the time. Taxpayer, right? Students are also taxpayers. Yeah. And if they're not taxpayers while they're in school, they're going to be taxpayers. And they get stuck with all of this debt, and they're unable to start businesses, create jobs, buy homes, cars, participate in the economy. That's a big problem. Huge problem. Look, again, all of this started is because the right wing hates educated people, hates education, and only wants the well-to-do to get education so that they can stay on top of the economic heap, preventing the younger generations from attaining the American dream. We know that's the cause. So the solution here is not just to do means-tested forgiveness on some portion of student loans. I'll agree with people that argue, hey, look, that's just a Band-Aid. That's not going to fix the problem. Agreed. To fix the problem, you actually have to undo what Reagan and Nixon had done and fully fund state schools and then guarantee tuition-free higher education at public colleges and universities. That's the only way to really fix it. And of course, once you've done that, then do mass debt elimination. Not just a little bit of relief, but wipe out student loan debt completely. Now, one last thing. This will be vetoed by President Biden. At least he said he'll veto this. But at the end of the day, it really shows you their priorities. This is a gigantic middle finger to the millions of Americans, the over 20 million, who had applied and been approved for this, student debt relief. Giant middle finger to them. And it also comes from Democrats. So keep that in mind when you go to vote, especially in places like West Virginia and Arizona.